Known as Parkland in 1916, called Cock or Cox Hill in the colonial and post-Revolutionary War period, here we are at the now named Inwood Hill Park. Its original name was in honor of the American fort built here to fight during the American Revolution. As you can see, they have the spirit of the troops during the American Revolution. This park right here is the last natural forest and salt marsh in all of Manhattan. Unfortunately, the salt marsh is closed right now. However, I want to talk to you about the name of this park. The Cock Hill or Cox Hill name is theorized to be inspired by the original native name of this very same land, which was Shorakapak. Fort Cock Hill is also the name of the American fort here that was overtaken by the British, but more on that later.
Here in Inwood Hill Park, the Native Americans, better known as the Lenape's or the Delawares, they were the inhabitants of this part of the park in the 17th century. And they used the river, the Hudson and Harlem River, for sources of food. And they call this park the Shanamrock, which is where the name Fort Cox originated from.
Shorakapak translates to the waiting place or the edge of the water or the place between the water. And as we can see here, there is water over there. If you go past it, you can see more of the natural Manhattan landscape that no longer exists. Is this true, Abby?
Yes, it's definitely true.
Period. We got this from the New York Parks Department. As Abby mentioned earlier, the Lenape, or the Delawares, relied heavily on both river channels, so the Hudson River and the Harlem River. Nowadays, you should not fish here because this water is very polluted and terrible. But imagine once upon a time, all of it looked like what you see here. If you can see there, we have some natural marsh, we have some natural plants, some natural flora that is native to the area. And this is what it used to look like on the other side as well. So imagine you're looking out to the other side and there's more of these beautiful, beautiful leaves. We had to ask about a homeless encampment that we heard about. And you know, it's nighttime, this is the only time we were free, we're putting in the work, but we didn't want to run into danger. And so we actually found out that we should watch out for coyotes and raccoons, which means what? Coyotes and raccoons were actually the native wildlife. If you were a Native American, you would often, or maybe not so often, run into raccoons and coyotes. And that's something that you had to watch out for in the nighttime. They didn't have the privilege of another path. What is pictured above is a section of the park called the Indian Caves. Basically, artifacts and remains of old campfires have been found in rock shelters like this one behind me, meaning that the Lenapes used temporary living quarters and shelters during the hot weather. The rock formations here and all around this park were formed by the Wisconsin Glacier. So 1.5 million years ago, the Earth's most recent ice age started and only ended 10,000 years ago. During that time, this whole area was beneath a huge ice sheet. The last of the 4 glacial advances of the Pleistocene epoch, the science name of the ice age, was the Wisconsin ice sheet. This is the one that affected New York City most. It stretched from Massachusetts to Montana, is estimated to have been 300 feet thick, and eventually crept to New York. It deepened the Hudson River, is the cause for the Great Lakes and the Finger Lakes, and even modified the Adirondack Mountains. The glacial activities of the Wisconsin ice sheet are the reason why Inwood Park's terrain has valleys, ridges, hills, caves, and everything else that once also was in Central Park before it was all taken down and leveled to be more of a commodity. We were walking toward a certain very special rock that you will see, and we came across this flood. As you can see, the water from the river is overflowing into the street. This is very bad, and this is showing what the Americans or the people that live here now, including us, and this is how we are affecting the environment. As you can see, there is absolutely no lighting there, so we absolutely cannot go into the Indian Caves. This is where Shirakapak Rock is, and this rock contains a plaque on top. Over there, you can't see it at all, but there is a plaque. A plaque to honor two things. First of all, the original sale of Manhattan Island between the Native Americans and the colonists. This is a very dark thing because the Native Americans, they had no concept of land ownership. They were nomads. They would go in between other people's lands, and it was completely fine because that was their culture. However, when the Dutch bought the land, they didn't understand that it was forever, and they let the Dutch have all of Manhattan Island only for 60 guilders worth of trade, and that's it. This rock also commemorates a beautiful tulip tree that died in 1938 after a storm, but it was here for 280 years, and it is said to be a living link between the Lenape and this very land. This here is another landmark in the park. It is Whaleback Rock. It is named this because it looks like the top of a whale coming out of water. However, this same rock is a continuation of the very rock that lines Manhattan floors. It is called Manhattan schist, and is what most of our island is built on. Colonists from Europe settled here in the 17th and 18th centuries, and during the Revolutionary War of 1775 till 1783, American forces built an earthwork fort. It had 2 cannons and was built in a pentagon shape. It is only one of many forts. Down about 20 blocks, we have Fort Tryon, now known as Fort Tryon Park, once it was converted. This sign is all that's left of Cock Hill Fort. It fell to British troops and their German allies on November 16, 1776, and they held it until the end of the war. Once they took over, they actually attacked American forces over in Fort Tryon. So here we are at Fort Tryon Park. Now, the overlook shows you Inwood and Washington Heights. However, once upon a time, right on this side, we have Inwood Hill Park across the street. Well, across 30 blocks. Fort Cox, they sent their bombs, their missiles, well, it wasn't missiles and bombs, it was cannonballs. They sent them here and attacked Fort Tryon because by then they had been taken over by the British because their general had surrendered to the British. And once they attacked Fort Tryon, this general also surrendered to the British because they had 3,000 troops lost, only 200 of which died. The rest of them, 2,800 people, they were taken captive. And that wasn't better than dying because they were taken captive and all of them died from being starved or tortured. After America won, families came back here and resumed their farming. This was only after Evacuation Day. Although the war technically ended on October 19th of 1783, English troops were still here in Manhattan until November 25th of 1783, or Evacuation Day. George Washington came up here and reclaimed possession. He started from the Inwood area, so where we are right now, and went down to Battery, claiming triumph. So this is the inscription outside of Fort Washington. An outpost of Fort Washington was gallantly defended in November 1776 by the Maryland and Virginia Regiment. After its capture, it was named Fort Tryon in honor of the last English civil governor of New York. And as you can see, 1776, so that's during the war. And of course, this is what we talked about earlier, General Washington, Fort Washington, named after our president, George Washington, of course. He actually came back here in 1783 and started his journey in Inwood to reclaim all of Manhattan from the British, who were still here.